A 58-year-old widow sends a letter directly to Joseph Stalin. She does not ask for peace. She does not ask for bread. She attaches a check for 50,000 rubles. Her demand? A T-34 battle tank and the legal right to drive it into the heart of the German lines. They killed her husband. Now she is coming to kill them all. This is the story of Mariya Oktyabrskaya. You are about to discover how a grandmother became the Soviet Union's first female tank commander. You will see how she transformed pure grief into a machine of mass destruction. We all know the weight of loss, that crushing feeling of being small against a world that takes everything. Most people fade into the background, consumed by the shadows of their own sorrow. Mariya refused. She decided that if her world was over, her enemy's world would burn with it. To understand the magnitude of her transformation, we must look at who she was before the steel took over. Born in 1905 into a poor peasant family on the Crimean Peninsula, Mariya Vasilyevna was one of 10 children. Her early life was defined by the harsh realities of the late Tsarist era and the subsequent chaos of the Russian Revolution. She grew up in a world where survival was the only currency. In 1925, she married a Soviet army officer named Mariya Oktyabrskaya. This marriage was not just a romantic union, it was her introduction to the military way of life. Mariya didn't just play the role of a supportive wife, she became an active participant in the military culture of the Soviet Union. She joined the Military Wives' Council, trained as a nurse, and most importantly, learned how to use weapons and drive vehicles. She once famously said, "Marry a soldier and you serve in the army." She was preparing for a war she hoped would never come, but when it did, she was ready to be more than a bystander. When the German Wehrmacht launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, the Soviet Union was thrown into a meat grinder. Ilya sent to the front lines almost immediately. Mariya, like thousands of other women, was evacuated far to the east, away from the advancing panzer divisions. She ended up in Tomsk, Siberia. For 2 years, she lived in the agonizing limbo of the unknown. She worked in a cannery, her hands stained with the juices of vegetables, while her mind was on the blood-soaked fields of the West. She wrote letters to Ilya that went unanswered. The silence from the front was a deafening roar that grew louder with every passing month. Then, in 1943, the telegram arrived. It told her that Ilya had been killed in action on August 9, 1941, near Kiev. The news had taken 2 years to reach her. For 700 days, she had been a widow without knowing it. The man she loved had been rotting in Ukrainian soil, while she prayed for his return. Dark psychology calls what happened next instrumental grief. This is the moment when sorrow ceases to be a weight and becomes a weapon. It is the point where the victim decides that the only way to heal the wound is to inflict a deeper one on those responsible. Mariya did not seek comfort. She did not seek a new life in the safety of Siberia. She sought total liquidation of the past to fund a future of vengeance. In the Soviet Union of the 1940s, 50,000 rubles was an astronomical sum, the equivalent of several years' salary for a high-ranking official. Mariya had nothing but her home and her meager possessions. She sold everything, every heirloom, every piece of furniture, every spare cloth. She spent months doing grueling embroidery work, selling her crafts in the markets of Tomsk to scrape together the final few rubles. She was not just accumulating currency, she was stripping away her identity as a civilian. By the time the check was ready, Mariya Oktyabrskaya, the widow, was dead. Only the tank commander remained.
She bypassed every local recruiter and bureaucrat who would have laughed a 58-year-old woman out of the office. She wrote directly to the Kremlin, to the man of steel himself. Her letter was a masterpiece of cold, calculated intent. She didn't beg for mercy, she offered a transaction. She told Stalin about Ilya. She told him about her training. She told him about the 50,000 rubles she had deposited in the National Bank. Her conditions were non-negotiable. The tank must be named Boyeva Podruga, the fighting girlfriend, and she must be the one behind the controls. The High Command assumed this would be simply a PR stunt. They expected to take her money, put her in a uniform for a few photo ops, and then tuck her away in a logistics unit or a training camp far from the actual screaming of the shells. They were wrong. Mariya insisted on full, rigorous training. For 5 months, she attended the Omsk Tank School. She was decades older than the boys who were being sent to the front as cannon fodder. She slept in the same barracks, ate the same meager rations, and crawled through the same frozen mud. While the young recruits struggled with the complex manual of the T-34, Mariya mastered it. She didn't just want to drive, she wanted to understand the soul of the machine. The T-34 she purchased was a 26-ton monster of green steel. It was the apex of Soviet engineering at that point in the war. It featured sloped armor designed to deflect German anti-tank rounds, a design choice that had horrified German commanders when they first encountered it in 1941. It carried a 76.2mm F-34 cannon, a gun capable of punching through 92mm of vertical armor at 500 meters. Its V2 diesel engine roared with 500 horsepower, giving it a top speed of 53 kilometers per hour, a terrifying sight for any infantryman caught in the open. Mariya looked at this machine and saw her husband's legacy. She saw a way to reach out across the miles and touch the men who had taken everything from her.
In October 1943, she was finally sent to the front as part of the 26th Guards Tank Brigade. When she arrived, the veteran tankers looked at her with a mixture of amusement and pity. They called her Mother, but there was a hidden sneer in the title. They expected her to freeze when the first German 88mm shell whistled overhead. They expected the fighting girlfriend to be a liability. Her first true test came during the battles around Smolensk. The Eastern Front was a landscape of charred timber and frozen blood. As the 26th Guards moved into position, the German artillery opened up. Mariya didn't flinch. She pushed the T-34 forward, her eyes locked on the periscope. She maneuvered the 26-ton beast with a finesse that stunned the younger drivers. She wasn't just driving, she was hunting. In her first engagement, she and her crew destroyed several machine gun nests and a German artillery piece. But then, a shell struck the fighting girlfriend, a direct hit to the tracks. The tank ground to a halt in the middle of a killing zone, a stationary target for every German gun in the sector. The crew prepared to bail out or wait for the cover of night. Mariya had a different plan. She ignored the screams of her crew and the incoming whistle of mortar fire. She threw open the hatch and jumped out into the mud. Under a hail of machine gun fire, with bullets ricocheting off the hull of her tank, she worked to repair the shattered track. She swung the heavy sledgehammer with the strength of a woman possessed. She ignored the shrapnel tearing through the air around her. She got the track back on, climbed back into the driver's seat, and charged back into the fray. The veteran tankers who witnessed it didn't call her mother with a sneer anymore. They called her a guardsman. If you want to replicate this level of absolute, terrifying focus, you have to look at Mariya's blueprint. It wasn't just about bravery, it was about a specific psychological structure. First, total liquidation.
Most people fail because they keep a safety net. They have a plan B that allows them to retreat when things get difficult. Mariya burned her bridges before she ever saw the river. By selling everything she owned, she ensured that there was no home to return to. She had no possessions, no civil life, and no fallback. It was victory or the grave. This level of commitment removes the hesitation that kills most people's ambitions. Second, high-level access. Mariya understood that the system was designed to say no to people like her. She didn't waste her time arguing with mid-level officers who were bound by regulations. She went to the one person who could overwrite the entire system. She realized her story was her greatest asset, and she presented it to the only person who could maximize its value. Third, technical mastery. Mariya knew that being a symbol wasn't enough to keep her alive. She spent 5 months becoming a technician. She understood the stress points of the T-34's engine. She knew exactly how many seconds it took to reload the F-34 cannon. She knew the sound of a failing gearbox versus a minor mechanical hiccup. This knowledge gave her a sense of control in the most chaotic environment on Earth. Fear is often just a lack of information. By knowing her machine, she eliminated the fear of the machine. Fourth, unexpected aggression. The Germans and even her own comrades underestimated her because of her age and her gender. She used this. She didn't play a defensive game. She used the fighting girlfriend as a spearhead. By the time the enemy realized that the driver of the tank was a 58-year-old woman, they were already being crushed under its treads. Mariya continued her rampage through late 1943. In November, she participated in the liberation of Novoye Selo. During the fighting, she showed an almost suicidal level of courage. When her tank was damaged again, she once more jumped out under fire to fix it. She was becoming a legend in the Red Army, a living embodiment of the great patriotic war. Her letters home, which were now published in newspapers, didn't talk about fear. They talked about Ilya. They talked about the smell of diesel and the satisfaction of seeing German lines break. But the Eastern Front was a place where the odds eventually caught up with everyone. In January 1944, during the Vitebsk-Orsha offensive, Mariya's unit was involved in heavy fighting near the village of Krinky. It was a brutal, cold landscape. The fighting girlfriend was at the forefront of the assault, smashing through German defenses. Once again, a shell struck the tank's tracks, and once again, Mariya refused to stay inside. She jumped out of the hatch, tools in hand. She began to work on the steel links of the track. But this time, the German artillery was zeroed in. A shell exploded just meters away from her. A piece of jagged steel shrapnel, no larger than a coin, struck her in the temple. She collapsed into the snow, the blood staining the white ground a deep, dark red. She was evacuated to a military hospital in Smolensk. For 2 months she lay in a coma. The doctors marveled at her resilience. By all rights, she should have died on the field. In her brief moments of consciousness, she didn't ask about her health. She asked if the tank was still fighting. She asked if they were winning. On March 15, 1944, Mariya Oktyabrskaya died. She was 58 years old. She was posthumously awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, the nation's highest honor. She was buried with full military honors in the Heroes' Remembrance Gardens in Smolensk. The fighting girlfriend lived on, however. The tank she had bought with her life savings continued to fight all the way to Berlin, a ghost of a widow's rage haunting the retreating German army. Mariya proved that the human spirit, when forged in the fire of absolute loss, can become harder than the thickest armor plating. She proved that age and gender are merely labels that fall away when a person finds a purpose that is greater than their own survival. She didn't just want to mourn Ilya, she wanted to become the storm that avenged him. What would you do if you lost everything today? If every person you loved and every object you owned was suddenly stripped away by a force you couldn't control? Would you hide in the shadows of your grief? Would you let the weight of the world crush you into insignificance? Or would you find a way to strike back? Would you have the courage to liquidate your life to buy your own tank? Mariya was not the only ghost stalking the front lines of history. The fog of war is filled with individuals who refuse to be victims. Next time, we reveal the story of a man from the frozen north, a hunter who refused to use a telescopic sight because the reflection of the sun might give away his position. A man who sat in the snow for hours with a mouthful of ice so his breath wouldn't steam. The enemy called him the White Death, and he would become the most lethal sniper in human history. Subscribe. History is darker and far more resilient than you think.